Welcome back to The Director's Cut, a podcast brought to you by the Directors Guild of America, featuring today's top directors sharing behind-the-scenes stories of their latest films and insights into the craft of directing. Please take a second to subscribe to our show wherever you get your podcasts. In this episode, Nat Faxon and Jim Rash take us behind the scenes of their new comedic drama, Downhill. Inspired by Ruben Östlund's 2014 feature, Force Majeure, Downhill follows a married couple who are forced to reevaluate their relationship after barely escaping an avalanche during a family ski vacation in the Alps. In addition to Downhill, Mr. Faxon and Mr. Rash's credits include the feature film, The Way, Way Back, the movie for television, Fat Trick, and episodes of the series, Community. After a recent screening of the film at the DGA Theater in New York, Mr. Faxon and Mr. Rash spoke with director Jenna Ricker about filming Downhill. Listen on for their spoiler-filled conversation.
Hello.
Thank you, guys. How about a round of applause for that?
Thank you.
Yeah. So I have so many questions, but I'm going to try to keep mine brief and then open it up to you guys. So this premiered at Sundance?
Yes.
And then it opened last night on Valentine's Day.
Yeah. Yes.
Perfect.
Really
date
great
night
date
movie.
night.
Movie. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I can imagine all the dates that were like, oh, we're talking.
Yeah.
We are talking after this.
They came together, left apart. Maybe. We don't know.
So this, the original film was a Swedish film, right? Force Majeure. Mm-hmm. But this feels so less like a remake, and I mean this with absolute respect, more like a adaptation.
Yes.
So you guys talk a little bit about how you approached the project?
I think kind of with that in mind, I think, because we knew a lot of variables were going to change inherently just from the where we began with this, we should say that this began before us in the sense that it was Julia Louis-Dreyfus and Searchlight started discussions about working together again after Enough Said. And one of the things that sort of came to the table was Force Majeure. And along with Ruben, the original filmmaker, thought, well, it was very interesting, the idea of what would be the American version of this. With Julia on board, as far as tackling that first part of the adaptation of this or our version, was the fact that, with Julia involved, we really wanted to make sure that we were delving into her character's point of view, which Force Majeure is it's a fantastic film, but I would say it's about cowardice and masculinity, sort of focusing on the male character. And so I think with Julia, we wanted to add her, keep what we had. You have Force Majeure with Pete's character, with Will, and then muddy this relationship. So it really felt like these two people were going this journey. That coupled with an American couple in Europe changes story stuff too. It's a fish out of water story. So we sort of just, along with Jesse Armstrong, who started this, the writing process first, and we started working with him, and then Succession second season started. So he did have to go and run that. So, but along that way, it was sort of about threading that through from the beginning to end.
It was a great job, really, and really refreshing to see that approach, not just as a woman, but just, I do think the American fish out of water, all of that adds such another layer to it. And speaking of, Austria is not a bad place to have to film, right? No. But the snow, there's certain things as filmmakers are like, no pets, no children, no snow, probably might be one of the other things, right? So talk about that, because I kept watching it thinking, oh my God, that's a hell of a back to one. Every time I watch something.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. It was, a unique set of challenges and circumstances. Certainly shooting on an active ski mountain resort, that we couldn't control was difficult. We oftentimes were shooting on lifts and gondolas that were in operation, and we would sort of, put our cameras on the lift and, try to get them to stop it for a couple of minutes. But then, this large collection of people would gather at the bottom of the lift, skiers that had, paid a good amount of money to be skiing. And they would all start getting disgruntled and probably saying things things in German.
Well, they were saying things in German
that were not. We love movies.
We love movies.
Take your time.
Yeah. Welcome.
Yes. But no, we had a terrific line producer and really, had to be quite nimble and flexible with our schedule. So every, we would have about 48 to 72 hours advanced kind of weather notice of what we could do. And so a lot of times we would be pulling things that, called for sunny days and replacing them with things that called for overcast or stormy, so we were about as nimble as we could be under the circumstances. But, things that you've never done before in film, like I've never ridden a gondola for 7 straight hours, or been brought up in a snowcat at like 7 a.m. and then deposited on the side of the mountain and then picked up after the mountains closed at 4:30. So we had a good amount of resources in Ischgl, which is where we shot a lot of the ski stuff, snowcats, snowmobiles, different infrastructure.
The scene where our M character is slowly pizza wedging down, they actually made that slope for us. So we were up towards the top and they made this little slope, but it went to nothing. So to your point, the cast would ski down, then they pop their skis off, and then the snowmobiles would take them back to the top. And then some of our camera crew would, basically like water ski up. So they'd grab onto a rope and be pulled up, behind the snowmobiles. And then we just do that over and over and over again for that.
I mean, that's something also too. I was thinking about how many hours of shooting, right? Literally, like you have a window.
Yeah, 8 to 4.
But basically. Then you have the high sun. I mean, really, I was like the high sun and the reflection off the white, and oh my God,
it was incredibly.
You can only put so many flags up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we were somewhat limited. I mean, luckily, Danny Cohen, our DP, was. Did a lot of prep in terms of just the exposure of how bright it was going to be and, calibrating what we needed so that we could get in the DI later and, have all the pieces that we, so we could affect it as we needed to.
Well done. So another question I had watching the cast, I know that Julia Louis-Dreyfus was a part of it for a long time from the beginning, but then you cast it out with what, everybody recognizes as a comedic duo, right? And like superstar comedic. You guys are both actors and writers and directors. So can talk a little bit about bringing them to the space of being that vulnerable and that open, especially there's a couple of scenes that are just so beautifully uncomfortable, when she nails it to him in front of the friends. Yeah. But other ones too, and I just talk about that. Those are long takes.
Yeah. The scene in the middle, the fight scene, we'll call it, is an 11-page scene. So we shot that over 3 days. So we would just run it from beginning to end for them, just over and over and over again, changing, we had so much, we shot from both sides of the room, we had a ton. And so for 3 days, we basically watched them do this play over and over again. And I think, to the point of, obviously Julia and Will are fantastic, both comedic and dramatic actors. And I think knowing what that scene required sort of helped to understand tone as we sort of, bookcased all that moment, as far as like this play that seems to be in the middle. So yeah, we shot that all the day. And just fun fact to us, it was on the third day, we'd sort of gotten through all the emotional stuff. And so, it felt like, Julia and them could sort of not relax, but we got it. We did your close-ups and all their other stuff. And then Danny mentioned to us, he says, because we've been going back and forth across the room, we might want to shoot from the other shoulder. And so we went over to Julia and said, we kind of were done with the emotional thing. So let's just we just need maybe two takes, over your shoulder, and same for Will. And of course they were for it, but then they got into the zone. And anyway, that day, their performances were always amazing. We already had it, but that was incredible. Like something just happened, like an extra layer, I can't.
You wore her down.
Huh? We wore her down. Maybe she was. Maybe
she used the emotion of hatred
towards
us
and
in her performance.
But that is primarily the take we used. Like at least her telling that story is pretty much from one take. And so it was very nice when you got into edit, just say, all right, that's what we want. So, and then we built the scene around that.
Okay, so one other question before I open it up. As directors, you always have these moments where, like, there's no way we're going to get this, or, holy shit, we got it, right? So because this film seems like it's loaded with possibilities for that. Do you guys both separately have a moment where it was like, yeah, I'd love to hear that.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's plenty. I mean, we only had 2 days for the avalanche. So those 2 days were a little terrifying just because, the Way Back, which was our first movie, didn't have any special effects or anything. We weren't operating with this snow cannon that we literally had this practical snow cannon that would shoot snow onto the deck so that our actors sort of had something to react to, made this gigantic noise, but also, then they could sort of build, the special effects around that. I would say that was just sort of, mapping out that and knowing that we had 2 days at this actual restaurant that is where you see it. It's just practically on the mountain, and shutting that place down. Because it's very often nothing could be shut down. This is the only time I think that one of the few things.
Yeah, we own the restaurant. Yeah. And then we had some practical effects that were sort of like, was like a kind of a cannon that they set up on the side of the mountain. But there was a lot of, speculation that it may not work and that we wouldn't be able to use it. It was just like hauling all the equipment up on the gondolas and, setting off this sort of explosion so that all this kind of snow projectile would come towards the actors and sort of create the avalanche effect. And I remember we got ready for like the big test, at the end of the first day, and we were all like, okay, here we go. And nothing happened. Yeah. And we were sort of looking at each other like, oh, okay, well, what's plan B, And luckily
avalanche.
This is only the big moment of the movie that sets everything in motion. So no problem.
Yeah. And then we did a processing trailer one day. It's actually the scene that didn't make the movie, but we spent all day on that. And, those things that's a tight day too. So I think, it's very typical clock.
And it's very impressive though. I mean, these conditions, forget it. So I know I said it was the last question. I was going to open it up, but is everybody skiers? Were those legit?
Yeah, we had Will, Julia are good skiers and did a lot of their own skiing. The kids, we had one of the two kids who had skied a lot and was a great skier, and the other kid had never been on skis an entire life. And by the time we got around to shooting them skiing, he had completely picked up the sport, and so much so that we had to make him, worse than he was, because he was the kid that was doing the pizza wedges, and he had gotten so good by the time it came around to shooting. We were like, no, go back to being crappy.
That would be me. I was like, oh, pizza wedge, I got you.
Yeah.
Pizza wedge it. Yeah.
But we got very lucky. Even the G was a good skier. Yeah, so I would say it was probably 70 to 80% of them, and then we had probably 20% of doubles doing some stuff on like the drone shots.
Seamless. It's really nice.
Yeah.
Good job.
Thank you.
Okay, let's open it up to some questions.
No green screen. It was all practically done on the lift, and the lifts are slightly bigger in Europe, and some of the lifts are 6 to 8 seats. So we basically would put our family of four, say, in the middle, and then kind of jump from one side to the other. And then we also shot from the chair in front, looking back towards them. And we even did one shot that we didn't ever use, but it was like a pass by where the lift was kind of coming around, and as they were coming up, would go like that. That was a shot we chose not to use just because it was, we didn't need it. But so yeah, it was sort of like, again, like a NASCAR stop. Every time we would get to the bottom, we would quickly switch around. But it was all done practically on the lifts, and the gondolas are much bigger there as well. So we were able to kind of have our,
four background,
Julia
and Miranda.
Julia and Miranda.
Three.
And then our camera, focus puller, sound, and first AD, I think, all in the same gondola.
And then we were in the one.
Jim and I were in the front, on a monitor. Yeah.
That's pretty scary,
it was hard not to, just take advantage of the setting there. I mean, that was a big reason we chose to go there as opposed to trying to make something else in the States or Canada look like that. One, because I don't think financially it would have been as, budget wise, it wouldn't have made sense because of the amount of production design we would have to go to create to make it something else. And also just because that's just a dramatic scenery that doesn't really exist anywhere else but different. There.
Yeah, but also doing that, I'm just thinking of the rig and the whole scenario. That's a lot of trust everybody's having, but also great job on the actors as well as the technicians because, that's movement. It's like filming on a cherry picker.
Yes. It was really challenging just as far as like steady, as far as the camera goes. And there were some things we were limited to because of that, because of the movement.
Yeah.
And sound was, challenging. So those things were always in our minds as sort of what the approach was. And Danny, we talked a lot about using the Alexa, even though he, I think, had a lot of positive experience with the Red camera, we use the Alexa, I think, just because of the body is more maneuverable.
Right.
And in those conditions, it was just an easier camera to have.
Did you guys pick the longest runs? Were you guys like, this is the longest gondola ride?
Yes.
We're going to pick this.
It was like a 20-something minute.
20-minute ride.
Up and then 20-minute down. But we realized we couldn't shoot down because then it would just look like we were just.
So we only shot up and then there's like one sort of mid-station where, again, they were not happy about us stopping it, but we were at the point where we were on that for 7 hours and obviously everyone needed to go to the bathroom. So we had this one thing where they stopped it and it's just Julia and Miranda Otto plays Charlotte and us just running bathroom back on, Luckily you didn't have to see anybody, but you knew they were upset.
We would get to the bottom and the makeup people would just throw like makeup stuff at them.
Yeah, they're just like, they did their own makeup.
Throw snacks to us and be thanks.
Yeah, it was literally because
shoot.
It was Julia and Miranda were each doing their
own
makeup. So they were just fixing it up. Yeah.
I love these kinds of stories. They're so great. Yes.
That's a very difficult question for us because it
brings up a lot of sore spots.
We barely got through this one. No, it's okay. This is our last one. No, we do everything together. Just backstory wise, we met at the Groundlings Theater, which is a sketch improv theater in Los Angeles. So we were already performing together and friends before that. So and then writing sort of was first. We sort of dabbled into that and took this ride with the way back as far as writing and then to the Descendants. And so I think a lot of it, all of our stuff has sort of come from almost an improv background, which the tenets of that is like give and take and yes and do our best to. But I think we had a sensibility that just worked. So I think when it comes to directing, we do pretty much all of it together. I think, maybe we'll both go and one will take lead talking. But for the most part, I think with Way Back, we were learning by doing a lot of things. So we were both eager to follow this same thing along. But for everything, we just sort of, I think, we know when one of us has an idea, we let them run with it so that the other one can say, I told you so, it was bad. Well, what?
Nothing.
I nailed it.
You nailed it.
That's how our life works. Yeah.
Yes. I think you try to have this sort of same vision and the same thought process as you speak to crew and cast. And if that means us having a little sidebar before we go speak to someone so we're not contradicting each other, but usually we have the patience and the trust with each other just to sort of allow it to, heighten and explore, to use another improv term. Sorry.
I also think though, I often think about what would it be like to co-direct, because there's a lovely moment of looking at somebody and being like, yeah. And it's either, a producer you have on set, maybe it's an actor that's part of the process, but to have a director that has a similar taste and vision, it's got to be nice.
It is nice. I mean, not only is it nice, as Jim said, when your brain fizzles and somebody else is there to sort of pick up the slack.
But it's also nice just to
it's really enjoyable to share the experiences together, whether they be positive or negative, whether you're sort of,
because you already know how stressful this position is, all the questions coming at you, and you're just lucky to be able to look at somebody and go, do you know?
He's got that one. Yeah. You like dodge.
Do you have any idea what to say here? No.
Yeah. It's a miracle any film gets made. So it's nice when you can share it with someone. Yeah. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. A couple things. We had a little scene that happened after the place where we ended up ending, which was them going down in the car, sort of this final shot of them going. It had a little bit of a Graduate feel to it, what was going to happen after this. And we did sort of this last thing at the edit where we played with a very drastic cut where we ended up with what you saw, which also included cutting a scene at the top, which sort of connected to that drive. And for us, even when we got there, we knew, for those of you familiar with Force Majeure has the bus ride down, and it's very harrowing. And the actress, playing the wife, she is getting freaked out and jumps off the bus, leaving technically her family on the bus. And everyone gets off the bus, and so we sort of walk with them down the hill, and you sort of get a little. The husband lights a cigarette and sort of a little smile to his face that they take it out. Sort of the idea that it can happen. Force majeure, it's not black and white. She did the same thing. So we wanted our version of it with to muddy it, but our biggest thing was knowing that Julia on the mountain, Billy's character, was very clear with him. We have work to do. This is just for the boys, And so when we got down there, we had this idea to do this, snow repeating theme, coming and see the four of them leap away from each other in a small thing. And just the idea of them scoffing and going pretty much, which they've been talking about, that it's not black and white. And that's where we came up with that.
I also like the "how old are you?"
Yes.
moment. It's always so clear when you're younger. Yes.
We'd be foolish not to allow them to do what they do so well. I mean, like I said, we come from improv, so we know the advantages to, especially when you have one, shoot the script first to be safe, but also they had a good handle on the script, and it was in a good place so they could play with it. I would say that things happen most in places like Zach Woods is brilliant, and so like sea cucumber, that's him, so we learned he knows a lot about sea cucumbers. But because we did that 3-day scene, it was wonderful in the sense that we had the time to watch them sort of build off of it. And it didn't just mean new lines or anything, because they're probably not that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And it's also sort of the type of movie that doesn't really lend itself to big improvised scenes that sort of feel tangential, like where they just go into a whole nother area that doesn't connect with the story. So it really was just subtle pieces being added here and there, as sort of flavor, to what was already being filmed. And we were always open to it, and I think when you have really good improvisers that can improvise sort of based or, attached to the story so that it's connected to what's happening in the scene and it feels character based, then, it can be useful. It's only when it, sort of goes down a road and then you are, fretting about how you're going to cover the other side of it and everything like that.
And you usually get good, improv, you get nice buttons or at least options. Like, for example, we shot a line that was in the script at the end of the big fight scene that Zach says. And then at one take, he just went and grabbed a carrot and took a bite. And then we're like, well, that's 10 times better than that line. Yeah. So we made sure to cover both of those, but we pretty much knew in the moment, that's the carrot. So, that kind of thing.
Other questions? No?
That's it.
That's it. They're done. They're done with the questions. Okay, I just have a few more. I'm just kidding.
Okay.
But I do, just going back to the actor thing, because it's, like you said, the tangential or the getting too broad for something like this. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That was just another thing I really was impressed by. And you're working with really great actors who do have such a natural inclination or talent for it, rather, I should say. Yeah. They had these very, awkward, ordinary people style like scenes where you're just like, oh, nobody's letting up. And you're almost expecting it. It's kind of the great thing about casting them, actually, is that audiences might expect the break in the tension and they're not going to get it.
Right.
So if you just talk a little bit about making that decision going in.
Yeah, I mean, it was something that we all talked about early in the process as far as what we wanted the tone of this film to be. And I think what we all could agree on was that it did sort of balance, it balanced between comedic and dramatic and, these sort of flawed but real characters that hopefully felt authentic and honest, making poor decisions, which is something that we're always sort of drawn to. And I think the comedy is really born out of the drama, as opposed to being the other way around. So it was really about sort of nailing the dramatic stuff, scenes and letting the comedy sort of release us from those moments. But I think everybody was very game for that. And I think in the writing process, a lot of things that felt too broad or, especially with Will, playing and Julia, who are these sort of comedic titans, it could have skewed too far in any one direction. And so I think you're trying to be wary of that and make, small adjustments when you can. One example was when he wipes out, on his ski day with Zach, there was a scene early on that was him crashing into like a bunch of school kids that are skiing down the mountain. And it felt like it could have lent itself to sort of being a broader moment than we wanted it to be. And so we, rewrote it so that it was just him and he wipes out and hits his head. But I think we were cognizant of it. And I think he was very on board with that as well, as was Julia. So you don't ever really know, I think, what the boundaries are, tone wise. It was challenging with this film, from the writing to the shooting to the editing, to know kind of how to calibrate where your sweet spot is. But like Jim said, I think that middle scene is a good foundation for what the rest of the movie has to sort of support. But we did find a lot of it or figure out a lot of it out as we were editing, it's always good to have it all. But when you sort of pare down when you get into the edit room about like sort of where your lines are,
So there'll be outtakes is what I'm hearing.
Bloopers.
Yeah.
Really, really well done. I actually love that he was by himself when he bonked his head. It just was kind of semi-pathetic in a really honest way. Like he's just reaching a little too far for himself, It was really, really great. We got a couple more.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, Miranda Otto. Yeah. There is a woman. She didn't work there. She was also vacationing, that actress, who sort of befriends, and has a similar sort of conversation about sex and, and exploring and stuff, but not, someone who seemingly seems to work at the place and not probably as, great thing about Miranda is that, she could play this sort of slightly heightened character, because we really wanted an American to sort of be, thrust into this, they never can get their footing to Austria. They're instantly sort of hit with this woman who's very upfront and stuff and constantly keeps them on their toes. So a variation on a character.
That's a great addition. Yes.
We didn't want to do it. We did cover ourselves with, moments of like, even if it was just let's go home. But that was, for example, it happens. And then they were going to go home, and then we were in the car, and we had this version where they should have share a laugh. There was this sign that was set up in the beginning that got cut, and there was a sign at the end, and it sort of had a theme that just sort of took on a different meaning. And we sort of liked that as well, and they sort of laugh, and it gets a little gradually at that point. But then we realized, the great thing about leaving something with a debate here, we knew that we needed to lop it off there. And so we played around with lots of different versions, but I think we wanted a sense of hope. Sure. I think the promise that they talk to each other during the rescue scene is, we go down together, but there's stuff ahead, and so I think Billy's character and what we talked with Julia was important, that she at that moment as a mom wanted to just deal with how her sons see their father. But as far as she was concerned and we were concerned, we didn't want her to rescue this man because he never apologized, never said, I'm sorry. And so I think that's, why we wanted to make sure at the end it was sort of hope, but at the same time, the black and white, and you just don't know yourself, because there's a lot about identity, and Billy goes on this journey with these people asking her if she's happy. Are you true to who you want to be? Or is you adventurous as you want to be? And she tries to be adventurous and has some fun, but also falls out of a stall. So,
I do think we tend to lean more towards an open-ended sort of murky, place at the end. In the Way Back, which is our first movie, we had a sort of similar, ending in the sense that there was, you don't really know what lies ahead for these characters, but there's maybe a sense of hope or some, a conversation that will be had. And I think it feels more real and authentic to life. And so it's always, I think we always try to practice restraint in those situations, which is something that we learned a lot from Alexander Payne when we were doing The Descendants. It was a similar, how can you suggest something without really having to say too much? And I think that's what we tried to implement in both cases.
Yeah, it's great. We get to feel it. We get to sit with it instead of being like the button and we're done.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
And I do love, did she improvise like, I will f you right through this wall? Did she improvise that? Because that was
No,
fantastic.
that was the script.
Well done.
But she did it well. Yeah.
She did it great.
Stealing
a lot from Jim's.
Well, the Way Back's
pain.
Yes, we steal a lot from our personal pain. But Way Back was, inspired by a sort of autobiographical moment, and then of course it goes off completely in a way that my life did not at the time. But I don't know. I mean, I do think we like flawed characters. I think dysfunction in family is very interesting to us. I wouldn't say we set out, because there was 4 years in between those two movies, and we were spending 4 years of that trying to get our another script we had written, which we hope to do this year, knock on wood, that is much different in the sense it was sort of like a sort of a dark comedy in the black market organ trade. So very different, no kids. So I don't know if we set out for that, but I do think that Way Back for us was the movies we grew up on, like John Hughes, like that was the type of movies we remember that. And so I do think we like to play in that place where, kids are dealing with very adult moments in their lives, which we all went through, Yeah,
they shape us, right?
And they shape us.
Did I see one other hand before wrap up? No? Okay, well, you guys.
Now we're done.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nat Faxon.
Oh, my
Jim
pleasure.
Rash.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Coming out.
Thanks for listening to another DGA Q&A. Don't forget, you can find past episodes of The Director's Cut wherever you listen to podcasts. As always, subscribe, rate and review us, and be on the lookout for upcoming discussions with Jeff Wadlow on Fantasy Island, Autumn DeWilde on Emma, and Lee Winnell on The Invisible Man. Thanks again for listening, and have a great week. This podcast is produced by the Directors Guild of America. Music is by Dan Wally.